Des Bryant was hurt for much of last season with a broken foot, and this season he's only played 3 games while he deals with an injured knee. And now this gentleman, the Cowboys wide receiver, was at practice Wednesday with tape on his right middle fingers, and after a potentially damaging soup accident. Bryant said he cut his fingers while chopping up some carrots for homemade soup. He said the injury was extremely minor. Max, Dez has been a headline grabber for a lot of the wrong reasons since he's been drafted by the Cowboys. Do you think this is the end of him in Dallas?
Yes, I do. And let me say that.
What?
Yeah, I think it's the end of Dez. And it may not be this week, but he is not going to last in Dallas. And let me say that I have always defended Des Bryant. I think he has taken so much unfair criticism, it's ridiculous. Because he's demonstrative on the sidelines, exhorting his teammates, because he's competitive and wants to win. People were giving him flack for that, and then he goes out and
why is he gone? So why is he gone?
Listen, when you take 5 minutes as a preamble, do I interrupt you?
I always make my point first. Maybe you should watch.
What didn't I just say? I think he's gone from Dallas. Now, so I've always defended him. So I am not saying he's not an excellent wideout, and there's not going to be a thriving trade market for his services. There will be. I'm saying very clearly, I don't think he's going to last in Dallas. Why? Here are the reasons. 1, they're winning without him. He's missed 3 games. They win them all. Beasley's balling. Williams is good. Like, they can do it without him, too. They're getting younger as they do it. There was a Romo-Dez thing, and Dez, who's going to be 28 this season, is getting, and it's not like he's old. He has plenty of more productive years ahead of him, but is not necessarily in this generation, the Dak, Ezekiel, Elliott generation of Cowboys. The Cowboys have a dead weight contract on their books. They will not be able to move in Tony Romo, which is why I say keep him. The problem with the Cowboys last year is no backup quarterback. They got one now. It's just not the guy they thought it would be. It's Romo. You're not going to be able to move that contract with all the guaranteed money on it for a highly injury-prone player in Romo. But for Des Bryant, who's still only going to be 28 this season, at $14 million a year for an elite wide receiver, there'll be plenty of takers for him. You can get stuff for him. Also, I hear what our analysts say here at ESPN, Stephen A. You bring this up a lot. You and I are around a lot of smart football people, and if you listen, you can learn a lot. And my brother, Marcellus Wiley, he was my broadcast partner for almost 6 years. I was around him 10 hours a day doing the radio and Sports Nation. Used to always talk about this. When personality trumps production, they're not as inclined to go along with the personality. That's what Marcellus says. I agree with that. And what Mark Schlereth said on this show last week, he talked about the fact that when you hear stuff start to leak out, maybe earlier this week, from teammates on the team, when anonymous sources start talking about he misses a lot of meetings, he's late a lot, what that's saying is that's starting to spill over and spill out. So if you read the tea leaves, a great receiver, I still think he has a great career ahead of him, but when you look at all the factors, I do not think it's going to be in Dallas long term.
So are you saying it's not going to be in Dallas long term because of his behavior in terms of being tardy? Or are you saying it's not going to be in Dallas because of the skill set and how it may not necessarily be needed because they're winning without him? Which one is it?
It's many. What do you mean which one? It's many factors. He's getting older. They're getting younger. They're winning without him. He's hurt enough that his production isn't what it needs to be to justify the distractions. So you're hearing the stuff spill out. That means there may be a locker room element turning against him. And he still has tremendous trade value, which you're going to need to move that money off the books because you got to keep that Romo money on the books because you're not going to be able to move that contract and you can spend that Dez money elsewhere.
Well, first of all, you're wrong on several fronts. Let me count the ways. Number one, I definitely think Tony Romo can be moved. Why? Because the one position where teams are willing to make those kind of sacrifices and stomach some things for is the quarterback position. And if Tony Romo can play, and they believe that he can play. You have enough teams with below average quarterbacks who can't get it done, that are desperate for just a quarterback who can't get it done because there are requisite pieces around them that they're satisfied with, that some sucker in the NFL will take a chance because of the quarterback position. I do believe that Tony Romo could be moved if indeed the Dallas Cowboys elected to and actually wanted to do that, meaning Jerry Jones. That's point number one. Point number two. When you talk about Des Bryant, this dude is talented and he's young enough and he's fiery enough. And you've got that kind of mentality. That's not something to be underestimated in the locker room, which even you conceded. So I would certainly say that's a plus in his direction. Plus, when he's healthy, he can ball, and he's a playmaker because he's open when he's not open because he'll go and get it. And he's one of those rough riders. You can't underestimate nor diminish or dissipate the value of a Des Bryant. Point number three, when you talk about the Dallas Cowboys and winning without him, let's be clear about what the Dallas Cowboys have done. They lost to the Giants on an opener, fair enough. They played a Washington Redskins team that was in flux, sort of adjusting, opened the season losing their first two games, okay? All right? At that time, Washington was not what they are right now. And I believe that they'll be just fine. Like I said when I was on with Doc Walker and the crew yesterday in the nation's capital, I was like, look, winning the NFC East don't mean a damn thing to me for the Washington Redskins. They ain't been in the Super Bowl since 1991. They should have greater expectations because I believe their talent is worthy of it. Because I believe, especially when Jordan Reed comes back, I think they could potentially be big time. Now we go to the rest of the schedule. Is Chicago Bears anything to brag about? We've already discussed that. How about the San Francisco 49ers? They might be the worst team in football. Then, of course, you got the Cincinnati Bengals. We don't even know what type of damn team they got right now, which is what we will get into a little bit later on in this show. And then last but not least, we also just finished talking about the Green Bay Packers, who have been a shell of themselves. So those games are who the Dallas Cowboys have beaten. They still got Pittsburgh on their schedule. They still got Philadelphia on their schedule. They still have Baltimore on their schedule, who I respect. They still got Minnesota on their schedule. They got a road game against your Giants on the schedule. The Detroit Lions have come out of nowhere. Matthew Stafford is actually making a little bit of noise, and they're closing out the season against the Philadelphia Eagles on the road. So what I would say to you is, when you talk about the Dallas Cowboys, your ultimate premise must be that they're winning without him. And I'm saying that remains to be seen. Let's see what happens as the season progresses, because even as we look at the effectiveness of a Cole Beasley combined with a Jason Witten, that's safe. Dak throwing in between the seams, in between the numbers. Not to say he hasn't thrown anything outside the numbers, because on occasion he has. He's been very impressive. He's been very poised. But take into account the fact that without Des Bryant, the better teams will get to key better. You're not going to be able to run all over them the way you've been running all over them thus far, I believe. And as a result, you also have the element of Jerry Jones wanting to put Tony Romo back in there. And who knows what kind of friction or what kind of turmoil that will all create. The Dallas Cowboys are an accident waiting to happen. And I just gave you a bevy of situations where accidents could potentially happen. You don't let go of Des Bryant when you know there are other accidents that could come.
Des is an elite receiver. By definition, there are only so many of those guys in the league, and logic would normally tell you if you have one of those guys, why would you move him? Not case closed, because Tony Romo, you say, is not an immovable contract. There's some sucker out there who would take an aging, injury-prone quarterback because when he's healthy, he's quite good. I think it's when he's healthy, he's quite good. But you can't game plan a season around him. I think that's clear at this point. Sure, you could probably find some sucker to take the contract. You ain't getting anything for it. You're just unloading a contract. And now you're right back where you were last year. No backup quarterback. It makes much more sense to keep that guy and move the piece.
Whoa. That's not what you said.
Excuse me.
That's not what you said earlier. You said they couldn't move him. You didn't say they wouldn't. You said they couldn't.
Okay.
I just told you they could.
You can't move him to get anything for him. Maybe you could move the contract to some desperate team, although I think that would remain to be seen. But even if I conceded that, if there's a sucker out there among the 32 teams who needs a quarterback that desperately, even short term, would they take a long-term commitment to Tony Romo?
Max.
Remains to be seen. You ain't getting anything for him.
Max,
You are getting something for Des Bryant.
Max, listen. If you can move him, you're going to give up something. You're going to give up something because it's the quarterback.
Who's giving up
the
what? A seventh-round
position.
Pick? You want a seventh?
No, you're not going to do
Tony
that. You're
Romo,
going to give up something.
Romo is old.
Let me ask you a question.
He makes $20 million a year, and he's a long-term deal.
I got a question.
Yeah.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
I got a question. If the New York Jets could keep their defense intact and get their defense the way it's supposed to be, because based on their personnel, their defense should be considerably better, what would happen?
I don't think they would do it.
You think I'm just saying anything, and that's just one team.
Yeah,
if you look at some of these teams out here that desperately need a quarterback, what a quarterback can do. If they were convinced that Tony Romo is ready to go.
But what do you mean? Like, if Tony Romo had a different back, if he had spine replacement surgery? That's not the reality.
No. Well, but here's the thing. The quarterback position, if you have the requisite parts around you, you can always find a sucker, without question. By the way, Minnesota, for example, what if Tony Romo were healthy and Dak Prescott was playing the way that he played? And Minnesota had a chance to get Tony Romo. You don't think they would have taken that instead of Sam Bradford?
When has Tony Romo been healthy? He's no longer a healthy player. That is my very point. He's an unhealthy
2 years
player.
Ago.
He's a chronically he's a chronic back issue. He has a huge per annum contract, and it's a long-term deal. You're not getting anything for him. Dez, on the other hand, would free up $14 million of salary, and you would get a haul for Des Bryant, and you're winning without him.
But that wasn't the argument. I know you could get something for Des Bryant. He's one of the elite receivers in the game. I wasn't disputing that. I'm saying the quarterback position being as important as it is, you could find a sucker to take a chance on Tony Romo.
Vertebrae are important too. That aren't herniated. Those are important too.
Okay, no problem. We'll see.
You guys glossed over a major detail though. Des makes homemade soup. Come on, that was like one of the most impressive things when I read the whole story. A man that can cook, you don't trade him away. Coming up.
Well, if he can, he cut his hand.
Right.
That's your argument? He can cook?
It's impressive.
Okay.
I want to see you make some soup. Does the NFL have...
I actually can make lasagna.
Oh, we know.
Believe that after your sister's lasagna.